Welcome to this discussion about getting into the flow state. Why am I talking about this in relationship to organizing your life or entrepreneurship? It's because a big part of being a creative entrepreneur is being able to work effectively. It's being able to get the jobs that you acquire done, or the jobs that you create for yourself to do finished in a meaningful way. And the best way to work, the best way to be able to execute your work is to be able to get into what is referred to as a flow state. And I'm going to get to that in just a minute. Before I talk about the flow state, I want to talk about something that I think you have to deal with before you can possibly get to the flow state. And the thing that you've got to get to before you can get to the flow state is knowing why you're doing whatever you're doing. So when I first started working for various companies, I noted that a lot of companies had mission statements, and I thought that these were very goofy. You know, coming from a public school background, it seemed like mission statements were a complete waste of time. The company's trying to make money. Why are we wasting our time with a mission statement, right? And I felt similarly whenever I would encounter like writers or artists or creatives who would talk about the specifics of their practice and the things that they were interested in. So in academia, where I live a lot, actually, I don't think the school that I teach for is super academic. We're more of like a glorified trade school, in all honesty. But in academia, there's a lot of talk of, especially in creative academia, there's a lot of talk about someone's creative practice. Like, what are the things that they're doing over and over again, and why are they doing that from a creative standpoint? What is it that they're trying to say, or what is it that they're trying to accomplish, you know? And to me, when I was younger, that all just seemed goofy. I was like, hey man, they're trying to be creative. They're trying to make things. I love making things, you know? But my creative practice early on was a bit of a free-for-all as a result of that attitude, you know? And what I found is that customers and clients have a difficult time with you as a creative unless you have a really clear message about what it is you're doing for them. If I come to someone and I say, I'm a videographer, to be honest with you, that's not a super clear message. That's what that tells the customer is, oh, okay, cool. I need to go find somebody who knows how to tell a story about my business and then hire you to do the grunt work of assembling their message. That's what you're really telling a client in that scenario. So what we need to do as creatives is we need to figure out how to communicate about our creativity in a way that people who aren't creatives can understand us. And a lot of times this involves us, crafting these mission statements and these statements of what our practice is about and that sort of thing. And when I'm dealing with clients, what I tell them is that I am a storyteller. I excel at telling the story of your business to people who don't know about your business. And that's that. Then they go, okay, great. And then frankly, they leave it to me to figure out the nuts and bolts of the media and how that works from a technical standpoint, because they don't want to deal with any of that stuff. And that makes my job easier, you know? When I'm talking to customers, what I tell customers, clients or companies that I'm working for, customers are people who are trying to buy from my business, right? Individuals who are trying to buy from my business. What I tell my customers is that I tell stories and I make merchandise related to monsters, myths, and Irish American culture. Okay, that's still a little bit of a mouthful, to be honest with you. I don't like that. I need to condense that a little bit better at some point in the future, but that's where I'm at right now. If you haven't noticed this about my channel, I have a hard time condensing what I do into something that's really, really simple and bite-sized. But I really like the idea of telling stories about. I think where I'm probably going to land is I'm just somebody who tells stories about monsters, and then let it let it diverge in crazy ways from there. And I think that's probably where I'm going to land. Um, but anyway, I'm telling you this to say that some of the most successful companies in the world have really, really clear mission statements. For example, some of the ones that I use all the time are Starbucks and Apple because they're easy to talk about. Everybody knows them. Starbucks' mission when it first got started was they wanted to bring the European coffee shop experience to Americans. And when they did that, it didn't really exist in America. Now there's European style coffee shops in every street corner, but it's because of the success of Starbucks. And when Apple first got started, their mission was that they wanted to bring technology to people who weren't techno geeks, right? And they have a whole mythology about how that came about. If you ever look into anything about the company, but they really want for people to not be. They really want people to be able to use technology creatively in order to help advance their lives, as opposed to being hindered by having to get into technical gobbledygook in order to use technology. And I think that clear messaging has made them very successful. We can talk about the inherent problems of both companies at a later date, but the messaging is what I'm trying to talk about right now. Knowing why they're doing what they're doing. And by the way, I will mention this very quickly. This idea that I'm presenting to you right now about knowing why you're doing what you're doing is very much lifted from a very popular book called Know Your Why. And if I'll link to it in the show notes so that you can check it out if you want to. To be honest with you, and I forgive me, author of Know Your Why, I don't even know your name. I found the introduction to that book to tell me the entire story of the book. It should have been an article as opposed to a book. So that's that's the bulk of everything that you need to know from Know Your Why, in my opinion. Now, once you know your why, you have a bigger problem, which is how to do that thing that you're doing, how to achieve doing what you're trying to accomplish regularly and excellently. And in order to do that, you've got to get into the flow state. The flow state. Now, this book that I'm referencing is called Effortless Mastery, and I'm going to plug it and tell you that you need to read the whole thing. It's by a guy named Kenny Warner. By the way, there's another book that's fairly similar to Effortless Mastery. It's called The Inner Game of Tennis, and The Inner Game of Tennis has spawned a whole bunch of other books that are similar to it. The Inner Game of Music, The Inner Game of Golf, blah, 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 blah. But they all basically talk about this idea of entering the flow state. And the flow state is when you are executing your work, whatever your work is, in a way that it feels effortless because you have gotten to the point where you are able to just work. And you almost become unconscious while you're working, which is sort of the cool thing about the flow state. I first learned of the flow state as a musician, and that's why Effortless Mastery is my reference, is because it's really talking about the flow state from the perspective of how to get there as a musician. But there's this great book called Getting Things Done, which we'll be talking about over the next few weeks, by a guy named David Allen. And he talks about the flow state for businessmen. The flow state happens for everybody. I don't care who you are, when you are doing your work creatively and excellently. And the flow state has to do with you being able to relax and focus on the thing that you're working on, being able to focus on the thing that you're working on. Okay. And I want to talk very quickly about some of the ways that we're able, some of the things that we have to get past, rather, in order to get to the flow state. And the biggest thing that we've got to get past in order to get to the flow state is this problem that Kinney calls fear-based creativity. Now, I'm going to talk about that in a very different way from how Kinney talks about it in his book, but I'd still do recommend that you check out Effortless Mastery and see how he talks about it. The biggest thing to fear-based work that's problematic, in my opinion, is all the gunk that we have as humans in American culture and probably in other parts of the world as well. I know it's true in the UK and in Prussia and some other places. We have all this fear-based gunk going on that was put upon us when we went to grade school, when we went to elementary school and middle school and high school, and possibly even for some of you in college or university. What happened to us during those years, those formative years, was that we were in this classroom and maybe we were like in a math class or something. And we thought we knew the material, but we went and took the test and there were a couple things on there that we weren't ready for. And we missed 5 questions or whatever. And now we get the test back and we got a 72 and there's no way to fix it, right? There's no way to go like retake the test or whatever. Now, some teachers might allow you to do that or whatever, but most teachers don't. And there's a really good reason they don't. You know, the poor teacher of the 30-person class doesn't have time to teach the material, give the test, and then give the test again, you know? From the perspective of the logistics of the way the school system's set up, it's difficult. There are all kinds of conspiracy theories out there about, you know, the school system being designed to crush the individual or whatever. And I don't think, I mean, that might be true. I don't really know. But I think that that's a problem of logistics as opposed to something that happened by design. The reality of it is that we learn the most from our mistakes. We get better because we make mistakes. We become the creatives we want to become because we're out there doing things and we're doing things not at the level we want to be doing them at. We recognize it's not at the level we want to be doing at. And then we're able to analyze that and then do it better the next time. And that's the exciting thing about being a creative or doing anything really well. I mean, I don't care what it is. If you're doing it well, this is what you've done is you've tried to do the thing. You've made mistakes. You've analyzed your mistakes. You figured out what you got to do the thing better. And then you go out and you do it again. This is how athletics works. This is how drawing works. This is how animation works. This is how writing works. I mean, I don't care what it is. That's how it works. That's how math works, right? And the idea that we literally spent a dozen, or in some cases, 16 or 20 years of our lives basically being told that we're not allowed to make mistakes is something that we've got to undo in our own psyche. You know, in addition to this, we need to let go of the idea that we're going to do something so perfect that everybody's going to love it. That is simply impossible. In fact, I would go so far as to say that if you do something and all you're getting is positive praise for it, the likelihood is that the only people checking it out are like your mom, you know, because your brother certainly didn't check it out because he'd be making fun of you about it. You know what I mean? I have students and friends and colleagues who call me all the time whenever they put out a book or something and they get their first negative review on Amazon and they get really, really hurt about it, you know, and they're like, I want to get rid of that review. I want to tell that person, you know, why they're wrong, you know. And the fact of the matter is that as soon as I hear that you've got a bad review, my reaction is, that is awesome. You got a bad review, you know, because here's the thing. First of all, if you don't have any bad reviews, the only people checking out your stuff is your mom. Number one. Second thing is, if someone thinks that you're good enough, that you should be doing something better, and so therefore they're willing to tell you that what you're doing is bad, that's also awesome. You know, like whenever I encounter a creative or someone who's trying to be a creative, who's not really capable of being a creative, and they do really, really bad work, and I don't know how to get them to understand how bad what they're doing is, I'll just pat them on the head and say, hey, keep working, and I don't give them any real feedback. And the reason for that is I don't think they can handle feedback. And if someone doesn't think you can handle the feedback, they're just not going to tell you anything. But if someone thinks that you are competent enough and professional enough that you can do better than what you're doing, they're going to tell you how bad what you're doing is. And that's fantastic because it means they think you can do better. It's a significant compliment when someone's telling you how bad your work is. It took me years to understand this. And what I've noticed is that all the people that I think are like the best musicians, the best artists, the best writer, like all of them, whenever I look at their reviews, there are people out there who hate them. In fact, one of my favorite visual artists is a guy named Dave McKean. And I was showing some of his work to some friends of mine, and they were like, "I don't get it. This looks goofy." Like they totally didn't like it. And I made a joke. Well, we can't be friends, or whatever, just being silly. But the reality of it is that while McKean's work is very impactful when I look at it, there are people who look at it that just don't get it, and that's fine. That is 100% okay. In fact, probably preferred, because if you're doing something so banal that everyone gets it, you probably aren't working very hard. And that's worth examining. So we need to get rid of this fear-based problem. We need to get rid of all this nonsense in our heads that tells us that we have to be perfect and that everybody has to like us, because none of that is true. All right. So we have to get past that in order to enter the flow state. Okay. That was fear-based creativity and teaching and learning dysfunctions. In order to get into the flow state, a lot of times we need to be in the right space to do that. Like, it's really difficult for me to enter the flow state if my puppy is barking at me, or my cat's pawing at my head, or my wife's bugging me about when I'm going to get the laundry done, or whatever. I need to be in a place where I'm avoiding interruptions, and I can just concentrate on the task at hand. And for me, that's very important. And we're all human, despite the fact that I just told you that people telling you that you're doing a bad job is fine. You also probably need somebody out there telling you that you're doing a good job. Being able to have a clear mind means that someone has to think positively enough about you for others to believe that you're going to be capable of getting there. So getting into the flow state requires a clear mind. That's what I'm really coming down to. Now, the biggest thing that you need to do in order to be able to get into the flow state regularly and to do great work is to be organized, both in your physical surroundings and in your mind. Now, that doesn't mean that your physical surroundings are going to be 100% clear from clutter. That's obvious looking at my room. But knowing generally where things are that you need in order to get your work done, and having a system in place for you to be able to just start working well is super important to this flow state. And I would also argue that being organized in terms of your tasks that have to be done for you to be on top of what you're trying to do professionally is very important. And I'm going to spend a lot of time over the next few weeks talking about that component of it, how we're going to organize our tasks so that we are managing our time in a way that allows us to get far enough ahead on our work that every time we sit down to work, we can enter the flow state and not be worried about time, so that we can do our absolute best work. And that's what it really boils down to. And the reason that we want to have our time managed is so that we can get to this flow state that I'm talking about in order to do super effective work. We'll talk about that starting next week.